look at the labyrinth. This is the labyrinth in Chartres Cathedral, France. I'm going to give a bigger picture of that now. And we're going to take 2 minutes of quiet together. For the first bit, I invite you just to allow yourself to settle in, drop down into your body. If you need to close your eyes, if you need to settle and reposition into a comfortable place, please do that. And I'll ring a chime to mark the beginning of those 2 minutes. And this is for you to take some time looking at the labyrinth, seeing this beautiful picture with candles. What do you find that comes up for you? What does it evoke within you? What do you bring today? I invite you to use your journal or a piece of paper and write any thoughts that you have. At the end of our 2-minute time, I'll invite anyone that wants to share a one-word synthesis of your experience or what you hope to gain into the chat, and then I'll read them or I'll have Tara help me. So we'll take these 2 minutes in quiet, allowing yourself to settle in to the beginning of this 4-week process, coming up with what you hope to gain or what you feel at the moment about this, and a word to share if you choose to do so. You would like to share anything in a word, something that you hope to gain out of this 4 weeks, please pop that word into a chat. And then I might ask Tara to read those to us as they come in.
Breathe, balance, clarity, promise, peace, mystery, serenity, harmony,
Thank you all for your sharing, and I always find it to be a powerful experience, even through the Zoom chat, to be in quiet together. And this will be our way of beginning each time. So our 4-week journey begins tonight, even though we had an evening prayer and a beginning introduction last week. Tonight we will formally begin with some history, discovery, and we will walk the labyrinth with the 3 R's, which I'll explain. Next week, I will get into the symbology and the sacred geometry of the labyrinth, and we'll do our virtual finger walk with the 4 R's. The 3rd week, we will approach the labyrinth in a very different way. We'll get more in depth about how do you walk the labyrinth with a special intention. We often think about we just go to the labyrinth and we walk and it does something to us. And certainly that is a very valid experience. If you've ever walked the labyrinth before, you know, you can just, oh, there's a labyrinth, I'm going to go walk, you know, and that can be a very powerful experience. But if you have something that you want to work with, we're going to talk about how we do that. We will have our labyrinth walk, and then we'll do something a little different in that we will have a closing circle, and we'll do some exercise around that. And the last week, we're going to do some exploration of the labyrinth in ritual. Worship is a ritual, evening prayer, for example, and we're going to do the labyrinth in evening prayer. And I'm going to share some of my experience in the ritual and around the labyrinth, both sacred and secular. So I'm going to fix it so I can see as many of you as possible. How many have walked the labyrinth ever before? Even if you didn't know what you were doing, doesn't matter. If you've walked the labyrinth, yeah, a number of people. Good. And one time, Faith helped me walk the labyrinth. That ended up being my assistant because I needed help. So she got a real inside look at the labyrinth. So the labyrinth is not a maze. And if you look, the picture on the left is a maze, and it's meant to confuse you. It is an entrance, and in this one, it has multiple entrances. There are places where you cannot continue. You have to back up, go back, find another way. And there is only one entrance into the middle, as you can see here. There's only one entrance, but there's many ways to dead end. However, a labyrinth has one path in. Here's the entrance. One entrance to the center after you follow the path. And then one path out. One way in and one way out. You cannot get confused. You cannot be lost. So what are some of the earliest known labyrinths? Well, there's continued research going on, and every time I do a labyrinth talk, I do a little more research. So I found some interesting research in preparing to share with you today. The Cretan Labyrinth from Crete is the earliest known origin. And early on, as you can see here, it was believed in mythology that the monitor was held in the center. You can see this half horse, half human type thing guarded in the center. And so you would walk through and you see a very cleverly designed labyrinth that's raised with high walls. And it's meant to protect in this monitor in the middle. Here's another example of that looking down from. And in every one of these, you notice that there is an entrance and then an entrance into the center, just like we've been talking about. On the island of Crete, the labyrinth appeared very early on, and you can see this is 400 BC on a coin that was on their money. We don't exactly know why, but it exists very early in Crete. The earliest or the oldest example of a path, of a labyrinth path, is in Spain, about 2000 BCE. Here you can see it's more rounded. There's less angular shapes. It's more rounded, but again, it's upside down in a way. Here's the entrance, and then we go round. It's hard to see the path when it gets through here, but you can see that there's a destination there in the middle. Another very early labyrinth is in England, 1800 BC. And again, this is the same Crete type labyrinth where you enter. Hard to see if this is still the left-handed labyrinth, but it appears right here that it's going, and here's your center. You can Google these and find all sorts of examples, but these are the earliest ones of really clear paths that I have found. So what is developed from the Crete labyrinth is what we call the classical labyrinth. It is what was the earliest path, and this is a very clean one that I like to use. It has more roundedness in the circuits. But one thing that I'd like for you to begin to notice is that as you enter a labyrinth, you're going to either turn left or right, being that here's the entrance and you turn left as your first turn. That's important to know because it does change how you feel when you walk the labyrinth. You can imagine if we reversed this and you came in and you turned to the right. Most labyrinths are left-handed labyrinths. But if you encounter a right-handed labyrinth, don't assume that it's drawn incorrectly. Although I'm going to show you an example of one that was drawn incorrectly. And they took the Chartres labyrinth pattern and reversed it. And it has a very different feel when you walk it. Some other patterns have developed, and just take a minute because I find this one to be disorienting to look at. But anybody want to guess? I'm not going to say anything. Is this a right-handed or a left-handed labyrinth? Raise which hand do you think it is? Right, if it's, yeah, I don't see everybody, but it is a right-handed labyrinth because here's the entrance and it turns right first. Now, this is a good one to talk about. How do you know where you're going to walk and where you are going to, what's the path and what's the line? So here you see this opening and it is in this gray and the line is black around it. So if we were to try to walk this line, well, it's all of a sudden you've got this way to go or that way to go. So that can't be. If you look in the center is black, but actually around that middle is all white with the opening. So that helps us to know. If this was all white, it would even be easier, but that's part of their creative design. So this is your right-handed labyrinth, and this is another example of a path. Fairly angular turns, lots of ways, and you can imagine once you walk it, you're not lost, but you don't know where you are in the path. And that's actually a good thing. It helps us let go even more. Another very interesting labyrinth is the Hopi, from the Hopi Indian here in the United States. And these numbers tell us how many circuits there are. And for example, I want to go back one to the classical, and we're going to see more of this, but let's count the classical circuits here. And the circuit is the path where you walk. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 circuits until you get to the center. So if we forward again, we're not going to count all these. There's many of those. Here they've mapped it out for you. They're counting the center of the Hopi counts as the 11th in their way of counting. You're already seeing that it's just like the rules of the English language. whatever the rules of the labyrinth are, and I say rules sort of like this, there's always some exception because there's many ways to look at the labyrinth. Here's yet another labyrinth. I don't know the origin, but I found it very fascinating. And there is a way in and a way out. So this is a very confusing labyrinth to me. But you can, once you get in, and it's double-sided. It's very strange, but just an interesting one to know. The Hopi Indian labyrinth also is called the Man in the Maze. Anybody has heard of that? And this would often be seen on a basket that the Indians would weave, and they would say that you would see this path somehow made into the basket called the Man in the Maze. Christianity does not own the labyrinth. This is a labyrinth from an Islamic temple, and this is from Toronto. This is not my photograph, but I did the research. And if you look, this was taped with masking tape onto the floor at an assembly. And look at the creativity of this. I love that. Here's your entrance. And then look how they drew this line here. This line not only protects the path, but then crosses another line to create the center. So it's a very interesting labyrinth. Here's the path, it goes around, it comes in, and a little protected center, because you really know. So if we didn't have restrictions of being close together, a person could get to the center, someone could step over here while this person steps out. And it's also pretty compact. You could get that in an interesting space, a small space. So this is a labyrinth here in Kentucky, and it is at a secular ashram. And I led a walk here for them. And it is a classical labyrinth, beautifully done in the grass. And here's the entrance. And let's count the circuits. 1, 2, 3. Sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and here's the center. So you see that the brick is the line, and the grass is the path. And we can take some time later on in the talks, maybe in the second or third week, about making labyrinths, because every time I walk a labyrinth, it's an interesting experience if the path is very rough and you struggle keeping good footing. This one was nice, and I imagine that this would be nice on bare feet. Some that where the path is brick can be challenging. I walked one, and I'm going to share a picture next week of one I walked when I was in Germany a little over a year ago, and the path was round glass block, and they were all uneven. It was very hard and difficult to walk. The reason I share this is in the backyard of an ashram that is not completely secular, but they welcome all people of all beliefs. And I think it's a beautiful statement to be able to walk the labyrinth in all sorts of experiences. One of the interesting experiences I had talking about the labyrinth and ritual, but as I was pulling materials together, it was in 2019, I gave a talk in Labyrinth Walk at the summer solstice, and it was a completely secular event for wholeness and healing during the summer solstice. And I did this little handout, as I like to do, those of you know, and I had readings, and I had so carefully chosen things that were earth prayers, nothing that was Trinitarian, no Christian prayers, no mention of Jesus, really careful about pronouns. And so one of the blessings that I found, I want to read it to you. It says, "May the longtime sun shine upon you. All love surrounds you, and the pure light within you guide you on your way. And I had these earth prayers on cardstock, and I put them out in the rocks, and so people could stop and get a prayer or a poem and read it. And it was just a beautiful experience. Usually, we might have 12 or 15 people. 43 people showed up to do this walk in this little labyrinth, and so I kept moving people away and moving people away, and it was just such this incredible diversity of people that came. And so it took an hour and a half to do the walk, which I thought, would be there for 20 or 30 minutes. And people were so involved, and they were sharing, and everyone wanted to pick up a poem and read it, and everyone wanted to light a candle, and everyone wanted to burn the incense, and everything I offered, everybody wanted to do. And so at the end, when we were having our closing circle, which we'll experience, I was about to gather everybody, and that was when we could all hold hands and put hands on shoulders or something like that. I was about to finish, and one of the ladies who was clearly really into this experience from the beginning got out and started singing, "Holy, holy, holy." Holy, holy, holy Lord God Almighty. And I was like, it was all I could do not to say, no, 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 this is not a sacred experience for the Christians. And I really laughed inside, because that was her experience and everyone loved it. And so we never know what our experience is going to be, and we never know what others are going to bring to it. And it turned out to be just the right thing. So thankfully, my initial urge to shush was squelched itself, and we all had such a lovely experience. I want to pause for just a moment, and if you have a question or a comment, I'd like to do that now before we talk about how we're going to walk the labyrinth and a little information about that. So if you have a question, just unmute yourself.
Robert, are most of the labyrinths facing left entrance, or are they 50-50? And if so, why the difference?
Well, I don't really know, other than that the Cretan Labyrinth is a left-handed labyrinth. Most of them are left, and and it's a good question. I will look that up. Most of the ones that I've encountered are left-handed labyrinths. And there is a psychological component for which way one turns. But for example, the labyrinth that I have up right now, the Chartres Labyrinth, there are 2190, there's 28 180-degree turns in that walk, which is 7 times 4. 7 is a holy number. So there's all sorts of symbols that we're going to talk about in 2 weeks as to why it's important that there's that many turns. And the 180-degree turn is an important thing for our minds and our body and our electrical system, nervous system, in that when you completely turn around, it allows us to completely reframe or shift. It shifts our thinking. So there is something important about the direction. Other questions? All right. When we walk the labyrinth, you can simply go to the entrance, walk to the center, and come back out. On your finger labyrinths tonight, whichever you want, and there might be time for you to do a walk on each of your paper labyrinths. I encourage you to have a colored marker or something and make a copy so you can do one each week, so that you sort of see where you are in case you get lost, as it were. You're not really going to get lost, but just so you can see where you are. Even if you're using your finger, it will work quite well for you to feel where you are and see where you are. You If you find at any point that you feel disoriented, stop, slow down. You can start at the beginning again. If you all of a sudden realize your finger has gone off into a different circuit, that's okay. Either just keep going and see what happens, or go back to the beginning. When you get to the center, you can hang out there for a little bit. That could be a moment where you let go, take your hand off the maze or the labyrinth. Know that you're at the center. Set the labyrinth down, and then come back. For those of us, let me pick up my labyrinth for a moment. Mine is an older wooden one from Veriditas, as I've said. So if I were coming into the center, mine has the rosettes, you can see, and we'll talk about those next week. The rosettes here, you can go into each of the rosettes if you're using the Chartres labyrinth with your finger, and pause a moment in each of them, or maybe go into the center, come back. It's your walk. You'll sort of find. But over these 4 weeks, explore the rosette. If you find that you've done you're done quicker than the rest of us, you can walk again. The idea is that you walk to the center and then you come back out that same path. Those of you walking the Chartres labyrinth are going to take about twice as long as those walking the classical labyrinth. There will be time to walk both of them in our virtual walk tonight. I'll allow for that time. If you have the Chartres path printed out, there are these little ridges on the outside, which we'll talk about, and the lunations, and we will talk about those. You can also explore those. For those of you who bought the bamboo ones that I sold, they do not have the lunations on them. That's a 7 circuit, and they often don't have them on. That does not diminish your experience. You can still take your finger and go around the edge of the labyrinth. After I start our time, I invite you to take your finger as if you were standing at the beginning of the path and pause. Pause and just wait. Knowing that from the entrance to the center is the first R, release. So tonight our first R is release. Wait at the beginning. And this is the labyrinth on the grounds at Sisters of Charity of Nazareth in north of Bardstown. In the center of the rosette, you're receiving. So while you wait in the center, you just wait, listen, and you receive. On your way out, it's simply a return. And it's not just a return to where you were or as you were, it is a return bringing what you've experienced back into this reality. These are my guides for when we walk in person, and I've left all of it in here because I think it's interesting, even if we're walking online, to know that we're all doing this together. So, walk with a beginner's mind. Even if you've walked this path hundreds of times or never, approach it with curiosity, as if you've not done it before. Take your time, it's your walk. Let others have their experience too. When you feel it's appropriate or you would like to, journal before or after you've waited in the center. Maybe take a few minutes to jot a few words down. Even though we're not going to encounter people on the path, know that others are walking, and you can sort of imagine If you look up into the screen and see someone looking into the screen, you can wave at them. It's okay. You don't have to. And if you were passing someone on the path in person, I often say we are cognizant that other people need to have their own space, but others might want to see a smile, grab a hand, or give a hug. So we're doing that virtually tonight. So in just a moment, I will ring the chime, and we will take about 14 minutes. We're going to walk. I will play some music occasionally. I am going to sing the chant that I taught last week and invite you just to meditate on that. You're welcome to share anything in the chat, a word, as we share this walk together. As we conclude the time, you'll hear the chime again, and that marks 1 minute before you'll hear the chime for the last time, and then we'll come together for a closing prayer. After that closing prayer, we will not have a circle or a closing of any sort. We will simply leave in quiet. You're welcome to stay for a few minutes on Zoom. We'll see each other, but we won't have a formal let's all go, good night, Lord's Prayer, or any of that for tonight. We will end in silence and just simply one by one. You're welcome to wave and that sort of thing. So before we begin our walk, are there any questions? way of all ways, God with us as we walk, shedding concerns that bind us. We turn and turn by your grace, walking a sacred path. Spirit of truth, you guide us as we move, searching your winding pattern. We sense the goal yet unseen, walking a sacred path. Face of the deep, creator of this earth, formed in your loving darkness, we find ourselves by your grace, walking a sacred path. Breath of the world, within us and without, rising and falling always, we learn to trust in your grace, walking a sacred path. Light of the world, we move as one with you, seeing your face reflected, and every person we meet, walking a sacred path. One of the phrases that has been circling in the labyrinth world and spiritual direction and many other realms of the sacred is coming home to oneself. I share, as we conclude our time together, a poem called Searching for Oneself. Just like we walk the labyrinth and discover the path, we are often searching just for ourselves. At the conclusion of this poem, I'll remain. You're welcome to share anything in the chat that you would like, a word or a phrase, and then when you're ready, simply sign off for this evening, and we'll see you back here next Wednesday evening. As always, email me with questions, comments, or anything you would like to share. This shared from the wonderful words of Joyce Rupp. Good shepherd who finds the lost one, the me I have known has disappeared. Will I ever recover the person I have been? Will I ever find and feel good about myself again? Will I discover who I am and who I am becoming? Protect me in this great vulnerability. Assure me that I will come home to myself, even though myself may be different. Silence my impatience, calm my worry, restore my soul, solace my distress. Help me to befriend my new self with tender hope and welcoming love.